going to be good for your business in the short run. But it is something that I've heard to be very, very common. So we're going to definitely talk about that in today's live session. But I know a lot of people, for some people that don't know who I am, just to give you a little bit of context of who I am, here's my resume from a standpoint like my background is accounting and finance, went to school, studied that, worked in so many different corporations in accounting and finance leadership roles, private equity, Fortune 500 companies, all the such. And then also now I've started my own accounting and finance firm, running it for full time for over a year now. And I work with a lot of small businesses and entrepreneurs and really helping them understand the financial side of their business and really helping them really put the pieces together, because that's the piece of business that a lot of people don't really spend a lot of time on. Unfortunately, a lot of people think about it as, hey, I'm gonna talk to my accountant when my taxes are due. But throughout the year, you really don't have a conversation with someone who understands the financial side of your business. But if you're not having a conversation with them, you're going to run into some issues. And then also, I host several different podcasts through the Business Talk Library. And, this podcast or this show or this content is finance for business owners, because I realize that a lot of business owners really avoid finance because it's complicated or someone's never explained it to them in a very concise way. So I really want to help business owners understand the financial side so they're not getting mixed up on it. And one of the big things that I've seen is when I go back to the slave labor mentality. Now, what I mean by the slave labor mentality is that, when you think about slave labor, it's usually they work very hard and for free. And where I have seen this come up the most in talking with entrepreneurs is as we're starting to talk through the cost side of their business, like asking them, like, okay, all right, how much does it really cost you to run your business? And a lot of times, if the owner or the entrepreneur is actually working in the business, they're doing some of the work, we'll go through the cost, and inevitably they always leave out a very critical piece, because when talking through the cost, I'm like, okay, all right, what does it cost you to really run your business? And then we go through, hey, what are the different components and different stuff like that? And I'm like, okay, all right, that is great, but you're missing a very critical piece. And what I realize is it also backs up to an issue that they don't know how to price their business right, because they don't have a good picture of their cost structure. So one of the other things that I've been doing is working on this new course called The Price is Right. Is going to be, maybe that'll be the name of it, or maybe it'll be named something else. But this new course, what we're going to do is we're going to dive through some of the topics on like how to effectively set prices from a financial standpoint. But what I'm going to do is pull out some of those things that I talk about in that course that I think will be immediately helpful for you to understand. So when it comes down to really understanding, your pricing, one of the things we got to take a step back and really understand, what does the cost structure of your business look like? And you got to, knowing your numbers is very, very important. And so when you think about your cost in your business, it's broken down between your direct costs and your overhead. So your direct costs are going to be everything that's directly tied to you providing your service or you providing your product, whatever cost is directly associated to that. Now, a lot of business owners in the service industry usually get this one awfully wrong, because they start talking about, well, I need these supplies. And then we get to the point where I ask them, I was like, okay, all right, how much is the cost of labor that goes into this? And this is where I hear the slave mentality come up a lot. Is they say, oh, the labor is basically free. I'm like, well, how are you able to get free labor? And they was like, oh, I do it myself. And I'm like, yeah, we got to change that. That slave labor mentality, because only slaves work for free. Because what I always tell them is, although you are the business owner and you own the business and you're the one doing the work, there still is value to your time. There's value to the effort that you put in. So we need to actually build your business model with your cost in mind. I know you're the business owner, and I know you're like, well, I just get whatever's left over. And I'm like, well, you're probably going to struggle like most entrepreneurs, because if you don't plan to actually pay yourself, or you don't have a strategy or a plan, and your numbers aren't designed and your prices aren't designed for you to be able to afford to pay yourself, chances are you're never going to be able to afford to pay yourself. So when you're looking at your costs and you're trying to figure out, hey, what is my direct cost? If you, the owner, are working in the business, or let's say if you have family members that are working in the business, or a friend that's helping you out in the business, you need to actually include some type of estimate for what is their time worth. Because you want to think about it from one aspect of, you may not always be the person who's doing that work. Imagine, what if you had to pay somebody else to do what you're doing as the owner in the business? Like, how much would that cost? So you can start building some type of cost in there, because labor isn't always going to be free. And you're going to realize that when you start to grow. And the hurdle that a lot of people run into is because they didn't think about that early on. When they start trying to grow, they start realizing that now I have to pay I have to pay other people. And what they end up start doing is they start trying to negotiate a very, very, very low, unrealistic rate. And they're like, I can't find anybody at the price that I need or at the cost that I need to be able to make my business work. And I'm like, because part of that is because when you built your pricing and when you looked at your cost structure, you built it with free labor in mind, because you, the owner, were doing the work. And I'm like, no, your time, even though you're the owner in the business, your time does have a cost to it, and you need to factor that in. And then the other piece that a lot of people really, really, really miss on is when it comes down to overhead costs. Because a lot of people, when they, especially in service oriented businesses, like I was on a call yesterday with a couple of companies in the construction industry, and one of the things that they are notorious for doing is when they bid a contract, they're looking at all of their direct costs. It's going to cost me this, 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 and this. And then they say, okay, all right, here's what let me add, 15% on for my profit. Here's what my price is going to be. And I always ask them, I say, well, what about the overhead costs for your business? Are you building overhead into the prices that you are quoting to your customers? Because the truth is, if you are not adding overhead into your prices, you're probably going to run into some issues. Because as a business, you have to cover the direct costs and you have to cover the overhead costs in your business. And if you haven't designed your prices in a way to account for both of those cost factors, you're probably going to run into some serious financial issues in your business. So you want to make sure you have a strategy and a plan for, one is being able to pay yourself. Even if you're the owner that's working in the business, you need to build that into your cost structure. And then also, when you're setting your prices, you definitely need to build in a factor for your overhead, because that is critical to you being successful in business. Now, I like to keep these videos short so we can get straight to the point. And even when a lot of people have been watching a couple of these videos, they've been reaching out saying, hey, how can I get more insight? Well, as I said, I'm developing a whole course around the topic of, building the right price for your products and your services. And it's going to take a little bit of time, because I'm going to go pretty much industry by industry. So if you're a product business, or if you're a CPG food product business, or if you're a service business, if you're a lawyer, or, if you're a doctor, or you're a marketing agency, or you do laundry care, I'm going to go industry by industry, and we're going to walk through some actual examples in those courses. So you'll be able to say, okay, all right, my business is X type of business. Here's a specific type of, self-study course that I can pick up. And then also what I'm going to do is I've been doing these CFO deep dive sessions. Like I did one last night with an entrepreneur where we spent about 2 hours really diving into their business and really understanding their numbers. And throughout the entire session, he was like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize this. I didn't realize how much money was going here. I didn't realize how much money I was spending over here. I did the same thing probably twice a week that I meet with entrepreneurs and do these CFO deep dive sessions. And some of the common feedback that they talk about is like, man, I didn't realize why this was important. And now this is the reason why I haven't been making money in my business, because we work through the details and really build out a strategy. So You really need the right tools if you're going to be successful as an entrepreneur. So definitely thank you for tuning in. I always say is subscribe on all the platforms that we're on to Finance for Business Owners, because we're going to be creating more great content like this. So definitely thanks for watching.